The Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States, is now sustaining our capitalist system with an endless flood of money creation that they produce electronically on a bank account. And they make that money that they're creating, literally out of nothing, they make it available at interest rates barely above zero. In short, the Federal Reserve is making free money available because the capitalist system can't work without that anymore. That's what I mean. It's life support. Let me explain. This year, the Federal Reserve began lending directly to corporations, not going through indirection. They did that in the past. No, right here. Here's some, you need money? You're a corporation in trouble? You made a bad decision about what to produce. You chose a poor technology. You're being outcompeted by the Chinese. Whatever your problem, here's the quickest, easiest way to solve it. Come get the free money. It's as childish as that. And so the Federal Reserve produces money and lends it to the corporations. That's called monetary policy. But then let's look at the other way the government is life-supporting capitalism. It's called fiscal policy. That's when the government cuts taxes, so people have more to spend and companies have more to spend, and at the same time the government spends more itself, pumping all of that purchasing power into the economy. When governments cut taxes, as Trump GOP did, and spends more money, as Trump GOP did, guess what? It runs deficits. That's right. In order for the government to spend more while it brings in less in taxes, it's got to borrow the difference. And here's how it works, friends. Here comes High Finance 204. You ready? Good. The federal government borrows money, trillions right now. It gives Treasury securities, a little printed document, to every bank, to every insurance company, to every corporation, to every rich person that lends to the United States government. So here's how it works. The government can run a deficit by issuing Treasury securities to the public that buys them. And then here's what the public does. Within minutes of buying a Treasury security from the U.S. Treasury to fund the deficit, the bank and the insurance company turns around and resells that Treasury security, you guessed it, to the Federal Reserve, which uses fresh new money to buy the Treasury security. End of this game, this kind of three-card Monte? Well, the federal government can spend more than it takes in taxes, supporting a dead economy, and the Federal Reserve is sitting on a mountain of Treasury securities it has bought. So in the end, the Federal Reserve is sustaining U.S. capitalism, directly by loaning to corporations and indirectly by loaning to the federal government to run a huge deficit, excess of $1 trillion. Here's what the meaning of all this is. First of all, our private capitalist system is defunct. It can't work. It's busted. You know what the hottest new term in high-tech economics is? Here we go. The zombie corporation. I've talked about this before. That's a company whose profits are not enough to cover the interest it owes on its debts. So the only way the company can survive, since the profits are not enough to cover the debts, is to borrow more so it can pay off the debts of its earlier borrowings and thereby becomes more zombified than it was before. Am I describing a fantasy? No, I'm describing the reality of U.S. capitalism. And nobody says a word. All of those libertarians, this must be their worst nightmare. The federal government is not an intrusion. The federal government is the only thing that keeps private capitalism from a complete bust. And that's the reality, folks. And the Republicans go along with it, and the Democrats go along with it, because nobody wants to say that the emperor has no clothes, that the system is busted, that it doesn't work. And here's another dimension of all of this I don't want anyone to miss. The only way that the Federal Reserve can do all of this is if the government says it's okay. The only way that the government can keep going is if it taxes large numbers of people, as well as borrows money in the end from the Federal Reserve. So everybody's in on this game. And what do we know about this way that the Federal Reserve is keeping capitalism going? It's funding the most extreme inequality in a century of American history. The 50 richest billionaires in America have made out like bandits over the last 6 or 7 months. COVID is good news for them. The crash of our economy is a source of immense wealth for them. You may be having difficulty, and I may be, but the inequality is growing like a mushroom after the rain. And we, with our taxes, are funding the government that is making all that possible. So I want you to take a moment to feel good that the taxes you pay when you buy a beer, when you fill your car with gas, when you pay your income tax, that money is helping to sustain monetary and fiscal policies that make the United States even more unequal than it was before these twin crises hit. Unequal big business versus small and medium, unequal rich and poor. Whatever else is going on, this capitalism may be on life support, but the rich are making money all the same. Never let a good crisis or a good pandemic go to waste. That's the real slogan of U.S. private capitalism.